Trigger warning. This podcast episode contains discussions of emotional abuse and narcissistic abuse. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Emotional Abuse is Real. I'm your host, Sarene Leeds, and I'm so glad you're here. I hope you're doing well, and if you celebrate, I want to wish you a Shana Tova, as this episode is coming to you smack dab in the middle of the Jewish high holidays. A very sweet new year to you all. Before we get into today's episode, a reminder that Emotional Abuse is Real still needs your support, and there are several ways you can do that. First of all, if you're a listener and you've been mulling over sharing your story, please don't hesitate to reach out via Instagram at Sarene Leeds Writes. That's SareneLeedsWrites. Or reach out via our Facebook page called Emotional Abuse is Real. Or you can reach out via email at hello@SareneLeedsWrites.com. A reminder that anonymous guests are always welcome. Another way you can support Emotional Abuse is Real is by heading over to Apple Podcasts and both leaving a rating and writing a review. The more reviews we get, the easier it is for people to find this podcast. And I am so grateful to everyone who has already left a rating and written a review. Keep them coming. Finally, you can support the podcast by following me on Instagram at Sarene Leeds Writes and following our Facebook page, Emotional Abuse is Real. And if you are able, please consider donating to our Buy Me a Coffee page, which I've linked in the show notes. As I've said before, this is a one-woman operation, and your donations help fund the podcast's production costs. I'd also like to remind you about my free newsletter. This is a great opportunity to stay up to date on my latest published articles as well as new podcast episodes. Also, it's a wonderful way to stay in touch with me directly, especially if you are a business or brand owner looking to punch up your website, email, or social media copy. In addition to all of my other writing and communications work, I am available to work with you on any writing or editing you may need with your business and brand copy. Plus, as an added bonus, I send out a free delicious dessert recipe to every new subscriber. I've left the sign-up link in the show notes, and you can also subscribe directly via my website, SareneLeedsWrites.com. My guest for today's episode is narcissistic abuse survivor and author Erin Riley. It sounds weird to say this on a podcast dedicated to emotional abuse, but we had a fantastic time chatting. Erin is a blast, and we have a mutual connection not only through emotional abuse, but through our careers in the music industry. As you know, I worked for Rolling Stone, and Erin worked in radio for many years, rubbing shoulders with tons of famous rock stars. Although both of her ex-husbands demonstrated narcissistic behavior, it was Erin's second marriage that drove her to document her abuse. And it was this documentation that ultimately became her self-published memoir, A Dark Force. Erin credits the writing of her book as a primary source of therapy following her 20-year relationship with her narcissistic abuser. Throughout our discussion, Erin provides beneficial wisdom on emotional abuse from someone who has been to hell and back, mixed with a healthy dose of humor. I'm so excited for you to hear our interview. So, without further ado, here's my conversation with Erin Riley.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a true pleasure and an honor. My name is Erin Riley, and I am a survivor of a 20-year marriage to a covert narcissist. And I had no idea that I was married to a covert narcissist for the first 18 plus years. So anyhow, I live outside of Philadelphia. I worked in the music business for most of my career. I worked at radio stations and I worked with bands and artists. I started and created my own children's music school. I've given a TED Talk. I've had an enviable life, on the outside. On the inside, I have had two really terrible marriages, one to an alcoholic with a lot of narcissistic capabilities, meaning he knew how to use all the tricks that they use. But my second husband, truly like textbook covert narcissist. And I was not even aware that that was something that existed. After that whole debacle, which I'm sure we'll speak a little bit about, I wrote a book to really help myself understand what had happened to me. I can tell you just really quickly how that book came to be.
Please.
Was one of my biggest resources for learning about psychological abuse, because it is very confusing, is our guru, Dr. Ramani. Right? I think a lot of people, Dr. Ramani, speak about narcissism.
Yes.
And another girl I really liked watching her videos, Lisa A. Romano, because she was from Queens. So she had a very kind of a direct New York sort of style of like, in your face, you're the one with the problem, fix your problem, then you won't find narcissists anymore. I'm like, oh, okay. And I had a lot to learn. That all said, Dr. Ramani made a suggestion that you write an ick list, is what she called it. And an ick list is every recollection you have of something icky that you felt to reinforce your feelings when you were with a narcissist, whether they said something or did something or something you felt, a behavior, whatever. Write it down, because when you see the magnitude of all of the things you've been dealing with, you'll be able to see it looking right back at you. Well, my list was 4 pages long, single-spaced, of hundreds of experiences that were confusing and upsetting and hurtful and whatever else. And so that's how I started writing a book. I started expanding on some of those arguments or cruelties that, were said to me, and trying to flesh it all out. And boy, the writing just never stopped. Like at some point I had 7,000 words and I had 20,000 words. And that's how I have a book. And so the book has become somewhat of a tool, sort of a manual for others. It's not just my own personal story. It also helps to kind of pull out and point out different elements of narcissistic abuse, so you can recognize them in a real life setting, not just like a clinical study or a doctor's report. So that's me. And I'm out here talking to people about it because I figure more awareness will help to teach people how to protect themselves. You just can't walk around the earth thinking that everybody thinks like you. That would be naive.
That's true. I'm so happy that you are here and that you are here to talk, because that's what this podcast is all about, raising awareness. And yes, the ick list is a much better title from what I called mine, which was the bullying log. That's really how I documented the way my boss at Rolling Stone was treating me. It was a bullying log, but it could absolutely be an ick list. And I think that that's a wonderful tool that you had at your disposal, and you were able to turn that into a book. So the book is called A Dark Force. And I've read it, and it tells the story of both of your marriages. So I will absolutely leave a link in the show notes so people can buy the book. And I know that you've told your whole story in the book, but I would love to hear your emotional abuse story for this podcast and for our listeners.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what I have, what I learned by writing the book. And
Please do.
I highly recommend that everybody write a book about your life. Not everybody needs to release it, but you're going to learn a lot about yourself when you take your life experiences and take them outside of your ruminating thinking and your own judgment, right? You can sort of see things more clearly. And what happened, which was really deeply upsetting and painful and but eye-opening and really helped me to heal, was that I tied back that tolerance for narcissistic abuse to my mother. As a child, I used to always blame my father. I used to think, well, my father was an alcoholic and he was depressive and he was emotionally unavailable. And so my opposite sex parent is the problem. He was a problem to me because I didn't have a connection with my father. My mother was at least getting things done. There were groceries in the house or, whatever. Things got done. Things got scheduled, arranged. I might even have a ballet class or something could happen, and I'm like, okay, mom is taking care of business at my house. So I thought she was keeping it all together. But my mom was, just, I guess, resentful at my father for drinking, of course, and not happy with her situation in life, sort of covering up my dad's drinking and taking care of two kids she didn't really want to take care of anymore, or maybe even in the first place. And my mother had to hold it all together, very stoic, came from an immigrant family. So she would just not deal. She would shut down.
Yeah.
So when I would try to get my mom's attention for assistance, she would stonewall me. Mom, 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 nothing, no response, not even a look in my direction. So I learned that that's acceptable. What else am I going to do? I'm a kid. I can't get her to pay attention to me. I guess I have to figure it out for myself. Right. So I learned how to figure out a lot of things for myself, but I also learned how to tolerate people not responding to me, not acknowledging my existence. Right. And in that, I never developed a strong sense of self, of who I was, and that I am a person. See me, mom, and, acknowledge me and teach me how to honor my being, myself, and protect myself. Right. So I never realized that until I started writing the book and seeing the similarities between my mother's behavior and arrogance and manipulation and whatnot. And it was sad. I still love her, and she's passed along now. And so did my father a long time ago. But that was the answer for me. It was to actually realize that I just was like a silly putty. I was moldable to other people's whims, trying to get my needs met. I needed love and attention, somebody to see and feel and hear me. And so I just kept choosing people that couldn't do that. Like many people who repeat their childhood neglect and or abuse and whatnot until they learn.
But before I just wanted to interject that one thing that I've been learning from doing this podcast and from reading your book, and we come back to this topic so often about how previous generations, none of them really knew how to parent with an emotional understanding. And it's so quick to just blame them and say, oh, you messed me up. Because I go through this with my own parents. I'm like, why didn't they know better? But the more I've been doing my own therapy and doing this podcast, I'm learning that every generation does their best with what they have. And they do, for the most part, not everyone, they do better than the previous generation. We are all trying to take what we've learned and do better for our children. And so I think that that's another reason why it's so important to talk about these subjects on this podcast or in your book, because it's a huge element. And at the same time, we can't blame our parents because they were only working with what they had.
And, of course, I've met my grandmother and my great-grandmother, right? So, and that I talk about that in my book, this generational stoicism, legacy of just sweeping things under the rug. And I certainly am not the only person from that generation to be raised that way.
Yeah.
And I completely agree, through no fault of their own. There's many ways, and this will probably be an unpopular comment, but I don't even blame the narcissists, right? Because they are a product of either their environment or their parenting, poor parenting or inflated parenting or whatever as well, too. Like nobody knows exactly the answer, but I just think I don't want to blame them. I just want them to stay away from me. Just you hold your
absolutely. I would say in the case of your second husband, from reading your book, I think that is absolutely true. I mean, when you write about the kind of upbringing he had, I completely understand what happened to him and why he treated you the way that he did. And I'm seeing that with some people in my life right now. And it's just heartbreaking because when those people don't get the help, they end up hurting so many other people.
Yes. So everyone in their path and themselves as well, too. It's a miserable existence. I would never want to be one of those poor confused people. I think they're very confused, and they're trying to cover up how confused they are because they don't have genuine natural feelings as emotional feelings. And so they see that other people do, and they just really can't figure it out. So I often say, and again, this is just my own personal theory, they say that narcissism exists on a spectrum, much like autism, right? And so people who are autistic perhaps don't always understand inference or face-to-face communication or nonverbal communication with people, but they can learn that in a sort of a textbook setting. Like when somebody reaches their hand out to you, you reach your hand back and shake it, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of think the same thing for narcissism. I feel as though narcissists are sitting there going, I don't get it, I don't get it, I don't get it. But that seems to be working for that person. So I'm going to do that. And that's how I get my needs met, right? But again, what a difficult existence to do that. But yes, I would say my second husband certainly was set up to really not thrive in the way that he could have or should have. It's really heartbreaking in ways. I tried so hard to draw him out. And what I realized at the very, very end of it was all of his cruelty to me was his fear I would abandon him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wasn't going anywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, so, moving on, I've learned how to recognize signs that will tell you early on you're dealing with somebody that perhaps doesn't have your best interests in mind. Right. So I've learned that, the love bombing that everybody talks about, the, moving too quickly into a relationship, anything that feels like somebody is negating your experience, like a kind of gaslighting thing, like that never happened. If anybody says that never happened, I never said that, you never said that, never, run from that. Because also if you're being the other thing, the projection, that was something I really I fell right into their projection thing where you're cheating. I'm like, no, I'm not. And you're trying to defend yourself. I had no idea that that's just the mirror. That's the narcissistic mirror. They're cheating.
Yeah.
Right.
The paranoia.
So all that came up later. I had a lot to learn, and so does anybody who's been through this. But on the other side of it, there's a lot of better self-awareness and awareness of other people. So, So anyhow, I did learn a lot, and I hope to share some of that information, especially with younger people. If we get this information to young men and women that are in their late teens or whatnot, and prevent them from choosing a partner that could take away 20 years of their life. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get into that. What would you say to young people, teenagers, people in their 20s, young adults? What wisdom would you give to these people? Because I remember when I was that young, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. When I think back to the kinds of relationships I was in, I shake my head at myself because we know nothing. And I remember I said this on Instagram several months ago. We know nothing, but that's the time in our lives where we think we know everything.
Yep. I recommend that people slow down and learn how to identify their feelings. It's the most important thing. Everyone has triggers that are their own personal triggers, your own personal things that trigger you. And that comes from your childhood. You may not even be in touch with it. So for me, it always felt like if I was not responded to, asked a question and my husband didn't respond to me, that would trigger me because that reminded me of my mother not responding to me. Was I aware of that? No, I'm just yelling at him for not responding to me. So that becomes a defensive reaction, and the fear reaction and that. So I recommend that people, when you have an experience that you're just not sure of, whatever it is, somebody says something and you're like, boy, that doesn't feel right. That feels off. I want people to slow down and just take a breath and try to think, ask yourself the question, right? Serene, how do you feel here? Is this making you feel serene or is this making you feel agitated? Right? Joe, sorry.
That's okay.
You've never heard these things before.
No, I've never heard anyone say that to me before. Never.
I've never heard Erin go braless, ever. Not once in my whole life. You ever hear that one? Anyway. So slow down and try to ask yourself the question, what is happening here? Am I angry? Do I feel disrespected? Do I feel controlled? Do I feel embarrassed or shamed or something? Like, what is happening here? And then sort of take note of that and operate in your own best interests. Make a decision with yourself first. How does Erin feel about this? Erin doesn't feel good about this. Therefore, Erin is not going to continue with this conversation. And then the next step is learning boundary setting statements, right?
Yes.
I had to practice that. I can't do that. The heck? I practiced them. I have a bunch of like little canned phrases in my head where I will say to somebody, well, I don't like the way that this is going, or I don't like the way this is making me feel, or thank you, I appreciate your opinion, but I will stick with what I know. And that's my favorite one. If you can get to the point where you're strong enough to tell a narcissist, I appreciate your version of reality, but I'll stick with the truth. If you can get that line in there. But when they're battering you, with their crazy emotions and all their crazy speak and all the punishment and whatnot that's confusing, it's hard to get there. But if you do get that little inkling of knowledge that you're dealing with somebody that's narcissistic, there are ways to educate yourself and give yourself some tools to not respond to them, because that's what they want.
Absolutely. So your marriage ended a few years ago, and you said that writing the book was really therapeutic. Are there any other forms of therapy that you went through for the sake of your healing?
Oh, that's a good question. I practiced yoga for 20 years during the period of time that I was married. And I think that really did so much to kind of keep me alive, because I did have many health problems throughout the course of that time that were stress related, whether it be, sleep, and I got Bell's palsy, and I was in a car accident, and this wouldn't heal. And I was on sleep meds, and it was inconclusive when I would do these studies. They're like, we don't know why you wake up bolt upright in the bed every 2 hours. Well, that would be cortisol and stress, but they're not measuring for that. They're looking to see whether or not you have sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome. They're like, oh, we don't know why you wake up every 2 hours. Well, neither do I. Here's some more medicine. And that just makes you sicker and sicker. So it took coming out of all of that fog. And then, of course, lucky me, there's a pandemic.
Right.
I had a lot of time to heal in a pandemic. So that said, I tried to, here's something I do that's easy. I didn't have a lot of emotional strength to do a lot. So I put on affirmations on my TV. I let them go all night long, and sometimes during the day, in yoga music. So I'll hear those subliminally. I try to stay present, all the time. It's just every time I catch myself, I'm like, oh no, that's not a good thought. You're intrusive. Get the heck out of here. Right. What can we think about that's positive? And it's not always easy, but I have a puppy, so I can always go there. I can go, let's think about how cute my puppy is. All right. So that's it. Those are my tools. I mostly do the affirmations, and I have the dog. Huge help. Takes me out for walks. He helps me meet other people that are not scary. You get to this point where you don't trust people, and you're like, somebody's coming toward you, and you're like, how are you going to hurt me? You're going to hurt me, aren't you? Right. But when you have a dog, and if the person approaching you is like, hi, dog, you're like, oh, they got to be okay. If they're smiling and saying hi to the dog. So that's mostly it. I'm actually writing a screenplay.
Are you?
I am. I'm writing a 6-episode miniseries from the book. It's based on the book. I'm going to tell some different stories in it.
Okay.
And so that's been therapeutic. I did my own audiobook. That was the most difficult thing I ever did, reliving it. But reconceptualizing it as a video presentation, as a miniseries, has actually been more creative, because I can add some sort of creative license and fictionalize stories to it, because it doesn't have to be exactly the book. The point is to showcase, maybe not the best word. What does it look like?
Illustrate.
Illustrate is the word, right? Illustrate subtle forms of psychological abuse that come from people who you just wouldn't think. The nice guy next door, the pastor down the street, your teacher, those kind of people that seem like helpers that really have a different agenda when they're interacting with other people.
I am so happy to hear that the writing process has been so therapeutic for you. I love hearing that. As a writer, that's wonderful.
It really is. I would
Yeah.
say, they say that for everybody. If you experience a trauma, write, keep a journal, helps your emotional health. It really is true. And if for me, the way it was helpful is it almost took it outside of me. And so it happened to somebody else. Like I could sort of give her a name and she is a past version of me.
Hmm.
So now it's like an exorcism, right? So that's
That's
kind of
great.
how it felt. And I still sort of feel like that, except for, like I said, when I was doing the audiobook and I had to kind of relive it, that was very
Yeah.
hard. But I
Yeah,
do feel
sure.
like now that that's over, I feel like it's finally in the past. And it's been 4 years.
Yeah.
4 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
since I've been divorced. So.
Yeah. But it's still, it's only been 4 years, but you were together for 20. I mean, that to tell me that, it's in the past after only 4 years, I say good on you.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I would say I feel like myself again. I can,
That's great.
I can think, I can read a book, I can remember something like those things. The brain fog is lifted.
Sure.
Um, but like I said, I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I'm a changed person. I will carry with me this extra added radar,
Yeah.
and a little bit of paranoia of like, all right, a little bit of fear of people. And
Yeah.
I don't want to feel that way. So I hope all of that goes at some point and it's all just kind of natural. But for the most part, I guess to that, to speak to that, and I've seen a lot of different podcasts like yours where people talk about you also end up having to let go of quite a few of your friends. I don't know if this happened to you, but people take sides and people don't believe you and they don't understand it sometimes. And then I had to realize that some of my friends possess some of these qualities and that I had allowed this in my life. So there's so many changes that happen at the end
Yeah.
of an abusive relationship like that. They're all good, but they're all painful.
They are. What I'll say is, yes, I did pretty much have to let go of everyone I knew from Rolling Stone because I needed um I needed to not be triggered. And it was, I mean, you'll hear this when you listen to my podcast episodes. It was a combination of, in a lot of cases, people just didn't want to get involved. And I say how that hurts almost as much as the abuse because they're just like, not my problem, And I know that that's, especially in a workplace situation, I get it, but it still hurt. And in a lot of cases, I think a lot of people thought I was overreacting. So that was hard. And yeah.
Yeah, it's the
So
not
it's
being
tough.
believed when you've been through
Yeah.
something so horrible and people don't believe you.
Yeah.
It's just
Or it just wasn't important enough. It just wasn't important enough because it wasn't like sexual assault or anything like that. So, so that was hard. And especially with my male colleagues, that was hard because they probably didn't think that, they just wanted to be friendly with everyone and they didn't want to take sides, like you said. So yeah, that's a really interesting point. So since it's been 9 years and, I've done a lot in my career since then, I definitely don't feel a void. The only thing that hurt a little bit more recently was I shared the podcast with a former colleague who was emotionally abused by the same person. And she gave me all of the praise. It was wonderful. But then she said, I hope that this is an opportunity for you to purge this. And I was like, I don't think I want to use the word purge.
No.
I said healing.
Yeah.
But I was just like, purge? It had a very negative connotation. Like, would you get over, even from her, it felt like, would you get over it already? And so I didn't appreciate that.
Yeah.
So
it's like being gaslit again, right? Don't you feel like it feels like gaslighting again when somebody does give you the acknowledgement of the struggle, the pain that you've gone through?
Exactly.
And I always think to myself, we're here talking, the inverse of narcissism is empathy, having a lot of empathy. So we have empathy for people, even narcissists. That's how we get victimized by them, trying to understand everybody. But at the same time, not everybody has narcissism. So these friends, your coworkers and whatnot, you figure they're empathetic friends and whatnot. If they were experiencing the same type of abuse, that they would want you to come to their aid and support
Yeah.
them and tell them that I believe you, I believe you. So yeah, it's a lot harder when like, wow, I would have been there for you. I know I would because I take this stuff seriously. It's important.
Yeah. I did hear from a couple of people who, when I started speaking about it more publicly, and they said, yeah, he did that to me too. But I still just got to look, I can't
Right.
speak for them. They're clearly handling it in a different way. I don't know if they truly felt it wasn't that big of a deal, but I couldn't waste my time with that. I knew how I felt, and I couldn't sit on those feelings anymore. And the more I did this kind of work, I realized that there were a lot of people out there like me who want to share their stories. And here I am.
In the end, it's all about you anyway. Like, I know we're talking about you, me, each individual, your experience that leads you to this, your self-awareness that helps you to, become aware of your need to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And then, just becoming more aware and more self-aware. You can sit around thinking, I got it. But this will take you to the ground. And at the end of it, you got it. Like, you really do get it, and you can move forward with your life. But yeah,
exactly.
It's really like what was broken in me is what led me to him. And now it's my job to just be focused completely on my own healing and my own growth forward in the right direction, and recognizing the inputs in my life that are good for me and the things that are not good for me. And that's all. I always say, put yourself first, not like a narcissist. Just check in with yourself and say, am I okay? Are we okay here? All right, we can proceed, right? So that's all.
I do have two questions from the book that are not spoilers, but I was reading it and I was just like, okay, I need to ask about this. So you dedicated the book to your second husband.
I did.
So you did. Was this your way of saying to him and to the world that you've learned to heal and how to live a healthy life and he hasn't?
I can't really be focused on him, to be honest with you. Like, I'm sure that's the truth, right? I'm sure that's the truth, because he ran off to Panama. He brought some girl he probably met on the internet or who knows, whatever, and moved right in. Like a month after he filed for divorce, this girl's like already there. So I'm sure there's a big long crossover or whatever. So he didn't give himself a chance to heal. He just was going to make sure he wasn't alone and didn't have to think about it and screw you and I beat you to it or whatever. So that's not healing. He may never heal, but that's not my problem. I'm going to say he probably won't ever heal. He hasn't shown
probably not
that he would.
That's been the case with a lot of narcissists. And because I know you mentioned that your favorite movie is The Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
So your second husband's workplace, ROUS Industries, was that on purpose?
Of course it is. Let me tell you something. If you're going to write a memoir, change everybody's name.
Oh, of course.
The streets you live on and the place they work. And I changed the name of the dog.
Yeah, I get it. No, that was just basically me saying I caught that.
Yes. Well, I can tell you, this is actually a cute little story. You'll love this.
Please.
So my husband, Fabio, that's his stage name.
Yes.
I would say he used the lines in The Princess Bride to kind of mimic intimacy with me, as this was our shared movie and he would just quote it all the time. But that's because the real words in his head were not "as you wish." They were probably "shut the heck up. I don't want to hear a word you have to say." But he would just go, "as you wish." And I'd go, "Oh, he's so romantic." Right.
Yeah.
So this was his replacement for genuine intimacy. Yeah. I decided to incorporate that all throughout the book. And when I originally wrote the book, there are 25 quotes from The Princess Bride that I was able to fit into the book. Well, there are only 5 in the final version. So how this happened was I reached out to the licensing department for the Princess Bride movie. Sure. I had an attorney reach out to them and said, listen, my client is self-published. She's doing it with Kindle Direct Limited, the Amazon company. She doesn't have a lot of money. Can we defer payment, or, can she pay you $1,000 now and then a percentage, or whatever, kind of things like that. And I said, well, let's talk to our attorney. We'll get back to you. And they said, if you can cut it down to 5 quotes, we'll give it to you for free.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that wasn't easy to do. Boy, was the 6th quote that was so good. It was painful to let go of it. But I added back a lot of those little references to The Princess Bride by what you just said. Where Fabio worked, he worked for a pharmaceutical company. There isn't one called Rouse Industries. Rouse stands for rodents
of unusual size.
But, I think that he is still working a little bit as a consultant from time to time. And like I said, I'm not here to malign him in any way whatsoever, or even identify him. I'm here to point out what a very covert and subtle psychologically abusive relationship can look like over a long period of time, so people can see themselves in my story and learn how to protect themselves.
And I'm so grateful. And I know that a lot of people out there are grateful that you do that. I mean, I do the same thing. I publicly state that it was at Rolling Stone, but I will, even though people who know me can certainly figure out who my abuser was, I will never name him by name, because
it's not the point.
It's not exactly. It's not the point. So, as we discussed, you had a very cool career in the music industry, and I know that you're writing a screenplay. But what else are you up to these days, career-wise?
I am actually doing a lot of stuff, and a lot of it came through connecting with people in the book, and so that's great because I'm
Tell me about it.
Hiding out alone in the pandemic, just isolated after this horrible discard and craziness. But yeah. In talking to people like yourself and other podcasters and whatnot, I have met quite a few people, and I have a couple projects that I'm working on. One is I'm the music supervisor for a reality TV show called The Recording Artist. So The Recording Artist, you can find it at therecordingartist.com, and also on Roku. We have our own channel, and on Amazon Prime. So what we do is I met through one of my interviews this wonderful producer named Aho Diagnolo, who has recorded people like Jordan Sparks and DMX and a couple of other well-known people. He started this TV show where he records bands in 2 hours. So they come in, they submit 3 songs. The A&R department, who are members of his website, will vote on the song that they get to record. They find out right there in the studio, this is what you're recording tonight, and they get 2 hours. But they walk away with a completed track from a really high quality studio. And then the 3 finalists I choose as music supervisor, who goes on to the Amazon Prime TV show. So that's called The Recording Artist. And I'm on that. And we've only done 1 episode of season 2, but tomorrow I'm recording episode 2 of season 2. And that should be available in a couple of weeks or so. The other thing I'm involved with, which you will also love, and it's in the early stages, but it's womenwhorock.com.
Yay!
Yes, because women rock.
Yes, we do.
And many men rock as well, too, but not all. And not all women, of course, too, but many. So that said, it is an online radio station, streaming radio station. It's already there. You could actually hear the music. It's all female voices and songwriting. And DJs and whatnot. And originally I was thinking of doing a podcast interview show on it, but I think I've decided to do a music show instead. And I may even call it Music for Narcissists or Songs for Narcissists, because guess how many of those there are out there nowadays? People, Olivia Rodrigo, and, like every time you turn around, Natalie Merchant from 10,000 Maniacs, everybody. So I found hundreds and hundreds of songs, and probably every other song by Taylor Swift is some narcissist, something.
I was about to say, you're forgetting like the most important one. You got to mention Taylor.
I never met a narcissist, but they love me. So that's another thing, and that's been a great community of women, and that'll be a resource. It'll be entertainment, but it'll also be podcast network, and it'll also be listings and resources and connections and online events and whatnot for women to showcase women and for women to connect with each other.
Oh, that's wonderful, Erin.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Thanks.
I did want to mention that my husband and I absolutely love your photo with Gene Simmons.
Oh, that's a classic.
It really
I
is.
had, I wonder if I could screen share or whatever, but they could find it on my website.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'll give the link to your website, and also I don't know if you can tell, but this is actually me crossing Abbey Road.
I can tell. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
My kid has one of those.
Oh yeah. As long as it wasn't me risking my life taking the photo, it was just some guy selling T-shirts. So yeah.
No, that's a great thing to have. That
Thank
is a great
you.
thing to have.
Thank you.
Gene Simmons. Gene Simmons is a remarkable human being. I'm sure anybody could imagine that.
Sure.
But he really is magnetic. I don't know what that is, but whenever he's standing anywhere, people just kind of gravitate toward him, and they don't.
I believe that.
He sort of collects people. So as he's talking to somebody, he's totally focused on you. He's a good communicator, but everybody who's waiting to talk to him doesn't leave. And then when he's done with that person and talks to this person next, they stay too. Next thing you know, there's like a little sea of humans around Gene Simmons everywhere he goes.
I totally believe that. He's actually one person who I have not been in contact with, I saw him in concert, but he's like one of the few people where I can say, no, I've actually never met him.
Yeah.
But so that's a great story. And I totally believe that. So yeah, we mentioned your website. What is the best way for people to connect with you? Website, social media?
I'm on everything you can imagine, probably, but I'm really proud of my Instagram. I design all my own little memes and stories and whatnot in Canva. And the reason why that means a lot to me is when I was married to Fabio, my second husband, he would tell me, he would do all that for me. Let me take care of that. I'll do all the design work. We owned a children's music school. I'll do the email marketing and the website.
It's making you dependent.
Yes, making me dependent so I wouldn't leave him. Like maybe that it was too hard for me and it would take too long to explain how to do this. So when I make these memes and these videos and they're really time consuming, I still love doing it because I'm so proud of myself that I can do them and do them well. So it's at _dark_force. So Dark Force, but there's underscores. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on Facebook. My name is Erin Riley, so I have a Facebook page for the book, but there's me there too. My website is either erinriley.com or darkforce.com. They both go to the same place, and there's lots of old pictures of me and tons of old rock stars from the 80s and information also from the book. My book does chronicle my entire life from 1959 when I was born until 2020 when all of this kind of fell apart in my life, and I had to kind of regroup and figure out what the heck I was doing to move forward. But that said, there are pictures of my childhood. My mother is a model. My dad is an actor. Some of my teen stuff, rock star stuff, and some stuff with Fabio as well too, to just try to give some visual. To all
Wonderful. And I'll include links to all of that. And people can purchase your book from the website?
Everywhere. You can get the book on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. I have an audio version on Audible. You can actually buy it at any bookstore. They may not stock it, but if you ask a bookstore to order it, they can order it for you. And autographed copies on my website. And, hold on, please. Very important. I also sell voodoo dolls in case you need one. I mean, in case, right?
Well, since this is going to be an audio only podcast, do you have a photo of that on your Instagram?
I do. And I have a photo of it on the website as well. Too.
Perfect. And I did want to mention, because I know that you do take the reader through your entire life in the book. If you have a moment, speaking of Rolling Stone, you may want to Google my name, Rolling Stone, and Mad Men, and you will find tons of recaps of the TV show Mad Men. I used to cover it for Rolling Stone.
Oh, that's incredible. That is incredible because, when I first saw that show, I'm like, I am Sally Draper. That character of her, she is, as a little girl, Kieran Chipka. Yep. Yeah. As a little girl, this character, she was so strong. She was just like, she was fighting back the whole time while she's being told, I'll give you something to cry about. Get in your room. Right. Like, shut up, go to your room kind of stuff. And I thought, that's what my life was like, but I didn't let it stop me from trying all the time,
Yeah.
Speaking of Taylor Swift, just real quick side note, there's a song called This Is Me Trying.
Mm-hmm.
And I really related to that because I'm always trying. And when I first read my book back to myself to try to proofread it and make sure that it was edited properly, I counted the word trying 42 times in my book. And I thought, okay, you need to stop trying all the time. Let somebody else try. So anyway, the connections is what it's all about. So being connected to you and other survivors and other people that need to hear these messages, that's what it's all about, is sharing information. So thank you for that opportunity to do that.
It's my pleasure. And thank you so much for your candor. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. And I'm so glad we've connected.
Onward and upward, right?
Absolutely. Right. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to my chat with Erin Riley on Emotional Abuse is Real. If you would like to connect with Erin and purchase her book, A Dark Force, I've left links to her website and social media in the show notes. If you would like to share your own emotional abuse story here on the podcast, please don't hesitate to reach out at hello@sereneleadsrights.com, through our Facebook page, Emotional Abuse is Real, or through Instagram at Serene Leads Rights. Please note that this podcast should not be used as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you are a victim of emotional abuse and need help, please call or text the Suicide and Crisis Hotline at 988, or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. You can also text START, START, to 88788. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. And if you can, please support us through our Buy Me a Coffee page. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.